So we are in the middle of verdict watch. So I will be using 2 or 3 sources to kind of go over what the judge charged the jury with. I'm going to be using Inner City Press. I'm going to be using PDD trial updates, and I'm going to be using NBC News. Okay, so it looks like the court that each side filed with the judge on the 24th. Um, their request of the edits of the jury charge. Again, respectively, they are 12 and 8 pages long. We won't review them, but I definitely will give you a quick little look at them, and we will share them to the screen. All right. Give me one moment. I've got a lot of stuff up here today. All right. So this is the one that the prosecution sent in to the judge. It's 8 pages long, as you can see. Let's make it bigger for all of us to see. It's 8 pages long, and they just went through here real quickly. I'm just going to go over. They talked about their amendments or edits to the sex trafficking and forced labor instructions, which is a lot. The trafficking, the conspiracy instruction, the effect on interstate commerce or foreign commerce, the venue, the unanimity, and then we will go over here real quickly. There's 8 pages. This is the one with the defense. Let's make sure I'm still sharing. Here we go. And they were reviewing California penal law for the racketeering, the trafficking instructions, the racketeering instructions. And again, I'm not reading them. And they still want this voluntary intoxication defense to be added on the instructions. The forced labor, the immunized witness instruction, the implicit bias instruction. And that's what they put it in. They wanted to make sure that those instructions were given as they've been doled to the. All right, so let's go over what NBC News says. It says deliberate, and it's by Doha Medina. Deliberations are officially underway in the trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs as the judge turned the case over to the jury on Monday. Combs has spent the last 6 weeks on trial in the Southern District of New York, and the government sought to prove that he was at the helm of a criminal enterprise, using his employees to help commit several crimes. He's accused of trafficking, kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, and possession with intent to distribute. Much of the trial focused on Combs' desires for freak-offs or or mood-enhanced fueled intimate encounters with hired escorts, often lasting days at a time. He's also facing 2 charges of transportation to engage in the prostitution and 2 charges of trafficking and 1 count of racketeering. So that is all that they have on there. So let's go here. Let's go to PDD trial updates. Let me make sure everything is as big as I want it to be. All right, here we go. Let me make sure everything is how I want it to be. La, la, la. So before we go over the what was said in the courtroom today, I do want to go over now. These are the predicate uh, charge categories under the indictment for the RICO. And shout out to Nate, the lawyer. This is his graphic, and we have successfully used this graphic all throughout the trial. Again, shout out to Nate, the lawyer, because this is his graphic. And remember, the prosecution under RICO, they have to prove that two of these things happened within the past 5 years of the discovery of the RICO. So they have to show that there was kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice, or witness tampering, forced labor, ex trafficking, transportation of the prostitutes, and the drug trafficking. These are the two. They have to prove two of these particular. I don't know if you can see me circle it or not, they have to show two of these in order for the RICO to have stood. All right. So now that we know that, let's get to what happened in court today. So the 12 million jury charge and deliberations. These are more and updates to come. All right. Jury deliberation will begin shortly. Jurors are facing the heavy task of reviewing all 5 federal charges against him: racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of ex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and 2 counts of transportation for the prostitute. And here's the charges as they were listed. The 12-member jury is made up of 8 men and 4 women aged between 30 and 74, hailing from Manhattan, the Bronx, and Westchester County. Their professional backgrounds span from the investment analysis to massage therapists, offering a diverse cross section of New York life. And that is what you want to be able to see. You want to see a diverse jury. Okay, so she goes into basically a recap about the prosecutors wrapped up their closing arguments by portraying Combs as a leader of a criminal enterprise, emphasizing this point with testimony from more than 30 witnesses, including Cassie and 2 anonymous accusers, Jane and Mia. Friday, the defense, led by Mark Agnafilo, argued that the prosecution's case lacked solid evidence and claimed the government was unfairly targeting Bad Boy Records founder. And so what we saw in the difference of the two styles is that the prosecution was being very legal and legalese. They were going over the charges. They were showing which charges matched up with the testimony of each person that testified, and they had exhibits and things like that to show all of that. However, the style of Mark Agnafilo, again, he is a native New Yorker. If I'm not misunderstanding, and a lot of people who've reported coming out of the courtroom stated that his cadence was New York. He told some very cringy jokes. I think he was trying to, because the jury is made up of more men than women, I think he was feeding into the maleness of it all. I'm just going to say that. They talked about, his style of how he was coming across. It was more of a personal style, not really debunking everything that the prosecution was doing. However, he was debunking the fact that they were trafficking by saying that both Mia and both Jane had, they were willing participants in this whole situation. And you've got to figure out when they weren't willing participants. I think their best cause of action will be Jane, because the only reason why Jane left was because Diddy got arrested. That should have been brought home. The only reason why Cassie left is that when Cassie got tired, she left. He wanted to say that Cassie had a lot of power. Talked about that, when she sued, she got her money, all of these little different things. So he was more so going to the emotional effect of the juries, I believe. All right, so let's get into what the judge says. Let's go over here. All right. I'm going to read you the charge. It's lengthy, but I'll do my best to keep it engaging. At this point, you've heard all the evidence and the closing arguments from both sides. Now, it's my duty to instruct you on the law as it applies to this case. So he is going to go over this jury charge, and that's what we're getting ready. These are the instructions that the jury has to follow in order to come to a conclusion about their verdict. Remember, the evidence consists of the testimony that you've heard, the answers given, and the exhibits that were presented. The attorney's arguments, so that means their opening arguments and their closing arguments, are not evidence. You, the juror, are the sole and exclusive judges of the facts in this case. So please remember that when they do their opening arguments, that's just to set the roadmap of what they're going to be going over with. But that's not evidence. Their closing arguments is them letting you know what they've done and where they want you to go as far as doing your verdict, but that you can't use their opening and their closing arguments as evidence. Now, what is reasonable doubt? It is not a guess or a hunch. It's a doubt based on reason and common sense after you've carefully considered the evidence. So they have to go through the evidence. They've got to sit down. And if they have any doubt after they go through the evidence, that is reasonable doubt. Not that you walked in there like, I don't think he's guilty, and that's just it. Go back over the evidence. That's what deliberation is. You got to go at least from the juries that I sat on. We went over the evidence. The one that the criminal case, that the one criminal case that I sat on, we went over. We took an initial vote, and then it wasn't unanimous, and so then we went over the evidence and everything that was laid before us. We used all of, we listened. Well, some people listened and some people just, they just refused to listen to anything. But I think we had, we had six not guilty and 6 guilty. And so we went back through the evidence and everything like that. We ultimately found it was a robbery case, and we ultimately found all the participants guilty. And they got the judge. There was 3 of them, and the judge gave them 10 years. 10 years. But anyway, let's continue. As jurors, it's your job to evaluate each witness' credibility to assess the truth and significance of their testimony. Consider their demeanor, consistency, and reliability. In other words, size them up. That's your decision to make. Combs has been formally charged in an indictment, but let me be clear. An indictment is not evidence. It's simply a formal accusation. Now, let me walk you through the charges. Count 1. Allegedly, from 2004 to 2024, the defendant operated a racketeering enterprise. Count 2. Between 2009 and 2018, he's charged with trafficking of Cassandra Ventura. Count 3. Also, between 2009 and 2018, he's accused of transporting individuals, including but not limited to Ventura, for the purpose of the prostitute. Count four, from 2019 to 2024, the charge is ex trafficking of an individual identified as Jane. So that's where this is important. You remember I told you it had to, when they made these charges, it had to be up to 5 years of the discovery of it. And so they discovered all of this after Cassie's lawsuit, because Cassie's lawsuit was the one that triggered all of this. So discovery was 2023. So they have it between 2019 and 2023. And since they discovered it, and they had at least one act happening between 2019 and 2024, they were able to go back further than that. Count five, within the same period, he's also charged with transporting individuals, including Jane, for the purpose of the prostitute. Each count is separate and must be considered individually, meaning that they have to give a verdict on the separate charges. Let me put them back up real quick. They have to give a separate verdict on count one, which is the racketeering conspiracy, count two, which is the trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion against Cassie. Count three is the transportation to engage in the prostitution with Cassie. Count four is the trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion with Jane. And count five is transportation to engage in the prostitution with Jane. So Jane and Cassie are two separate charges that have two different counts against them. I hope that I'm making sense. And the racketeering and the conspiracy is the overall charge that houses all of that. Okay. So they are definitely now in that. Let's go back to, because I need for y'all to see what I see. And so for the racketeering, these are the listed these are the listed predicate categories. And you do see that the ex trafficking and the transportation for prostitution, that's all listed in there as well. So if they find them guilty of the outside charges, let's go back. If they find them guilty of the ex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion for Cassie, and they find them, let's say, the transportation to engage in the prostitution for Cassie, then they have also gotten the RICO. Does that make sense? These are also separate charges, but those will be the same type of charges that you have under the RICO right here, the transportation and the trafficking. So if they find them guilty on those 4 counts, they've also found them guilty on the RICO. But let's continue. All right. As for the charge of attempt, the government must prove both intent, that the defendant took a substantial step toward committing the crime. Mere intention alone is not enough. To find someone guilty of aiding and abetting, the government must prove that the defendant knowingly took some action to assist, encourage, or facilitate the commission of a crime. Mere presence or association is not enough. Now, regarding the RICO charge, count one, the prosecution must establish that between 2004 and 2024, there was an agreement between the two or more individuals to conduct a racketeering enterprise that affected interstate commerce. So that means that they had to have agreed to commit One of these things. And so what the prosecution was looking at, that they believe, now this is the prosecution, they believe that that the Diddy and his security guards did the kidnapping. They believe that Diddy and his security guards committed the arson. They believe that Diddy, KK, and the security guards from the Intercontinental Hotel plus the manager, they entered agreed for the bribery of the $100,000 to keep the DV tape under wraps. They believe that Diddy and his people, his security team, did obstruction of justice when they were trying to get Mia to change her story or to tell a certain story while the feds were investigating. They believe that the forced labor that had to do with Mia, and it also had to do with Capricorn and Cassie and Jane. They have to show that members of his job participated in this forced labor. With Mia, they're saying that he kept her up for five days straight. Capricorn Clark, they're saying that Diddy blackballed her in the industry so that she couldn't get another job. The trafficking, this is the that the people in the enterprise did did what they needed to do to make sure that this happened, meaning going to set up the freak offs, going to go get the mood enhancements for the freak offs, giving the money, because again the personal assistants and the security guards were the ones that handled the money and the Gucci bag. I'm gonna put it like that. They handled the Gucci bag with all the stuff in it. And again, with the transportation, the prosecution showed text messages and receipts that the team, Diddy's team, that was hired by Combs Enterprise, that they went and paid the money for the hotels, paid the transportation via a travel agent for the escorts to come and to participate in the freak offs of the Wild Kings night, and they were paid for their services. The trafficking, the mood enhancement trafficking charge, they're saying that the assistants, KK, the security guards, D-Rock and them, were the people that were making sure that they were procuring the mood enhancements for the freak offs, and that the mood enhancements were there to be distributed to the participants in the freak off, in any other person that's what was in Diddy's friend zone or whatever. They must also prove that the defendant joined the conspiracy and personally committed at least 2 predicate acts. These are the predicate acts. These could include crimes such as sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution, or other offenses listed under the RICO Act. The government does not need to show a formal written agreement. A mutual understanding to cooperate is enough, and you may infer its existence from the circumstances of the cases. As the saying goes, actions may speak louder than words. You are allowed to consider the behavior and the acts of anyone you find to be a participant in the alleged enterprise to determine whether there was a shared plan or purpose. A few people in the courtroom appear to be so this is some insight into the courtroom. As Judge Subterranean continues speaking, a few people in the courtroom appear to be nodding off. One is even snoring. Damn. Combs is seated quietly, focused, and attentive. Behind him are all of his 6 adult children in their usual seats. If you determine, this is the judge, that Combs Enterprise existed, You must then decide whether it continued in a substantially similar form from 2004 to 2024. The individuals involved may have changed over time, but continuity in structure and purpose is key. Regarding the defendant, you must also determine whether he knew of the enterprise existence and knowingly participated in. The government alleges 8 predicate offenses under RICO, and here's the ones that they have listed: the kidnapping, the arson, the bribery, the witness tampering, the forced labor, the ex trafficking, the transportation for prostitution, and intent to distribute narcotics. Now, they've also said that it didn't have anything to do with quantity. It had everything to do that they were procuring illegal mood enhancements and then giving them out to people. Even if they were procuring mood enhancers that were legal, they still were doling them out to the people that participated in the Wild King nights. To meet the legal requirement, the prosecution must prove at least 2 of these offenses occurred within a 10-year period. Kidnapping, not considered kidnapping if the victim consented, but consent can be withdrawn at any time. So, in other words, they could get in the car, come get in the car. And she's like, okay, look, I want to go home. I don't want to do this. Hey, I need to go back home. That's consent can be withdrawn in regards to kidnapping. Arson under California law involves willfully or maliciously setting or causing a fire. Bribery of a witness occurs when someone gives or promises a bribe to a person, giving or about to give information to law enforcement with the intent to unlawful influence that person. Witness tampering under 18 USC section 1512B-3 doesn't require the target to actually be afraid, or the existence of a knowing threat is enough. Forced labor under 18 uh, uh, United States Code section 1589A involves the use of force or physical restraint. Okay. Consent, once given, can be withdrawn, turning a situation into forced labor. Ex trafficking has the same legal definitions as outlining counts 2 and 4. Transportation for the prostitute is defined the same as in counts 3 and 5. Regarding distribution of narcotics, including the substance named here, the government must prove it was done knowingly and intentionally. Distribution means an actual transfer to another person. Possession does not require physical custody. Control over the substance is enough. The statute of limitation for RICO, the statute of limitation is 5 years. Therefore, the government must prove the enterprise continued beyond 2019. And that's why Jane was so important. If they fail to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty. Because Jane was important for them to be able to bring those charges. If they don't believe that Jane has been trafficked, if they don't believe if she hadn't been trafficked, and if they don't believe the transportation of the prostitute, then they can't find her guilty of any of those charges that are in regards to Cassie. And I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, y'all get me down in the comments. So, in other words, if they don't show, if the jury doesn't believe 4 and 5, the trafficking of Jane by force, fraud, or coercion, or the transportation to engage in the prostitute with Jane, if they don't find any of those things guilty, then they may not be able to find the racketeering and the conspiracy charges to be guilty. That's the way I'm reading it. And I don't know. I don't know if the jury I don't know from the information that we received, the testimony that we received about Jane. I don't know if people believed that she was trafficked. Now, the transportation of the escorts from one spot to another, I believe, this is Pam Entertainment TV. I believe that that is a charge of guilty. But I think a lot of people are going to have a difficult time seeing if Jane was trafficked. It says here you must agree unanimously on at least one specific instance of the trafficking. Counts 3 and 5, which are transportation for the prostitute, such as knowingly arranging or facilitating transportation for the purpose of prostitute, even buying a ticket is enough. Prostitutu does not have to be the primary purpose. It's defined as engaging in actual activities in exchange for money or something of value. Again, you must be unanimous. Again, you must be unanimous on at least one specific act of transportation. So, in other words, if you believe that one of those acts that he was involved in one of those acts of transportation, then you can find them guilty of that. Lastly, the government must prove that at least one act occurred within the jurisdiction of the Southern District of New York, which includes 8 counties. So that's why it was important for them to talk about. They brought, what was his name? The very first escort that said that he went to several places in New York, uh, where they had it at at the hotels in New York City. They had it in, I think, one of the homes of Diddy. But anyway, they have to show that. We're now in the final stretch. Let me leave you with some important instructions as you prepare to deliberate. When considering expert testimony, remember, just because I allowed it into evidence does not mean that you have to accept it as true. It's up to you to decide how much weight, if any, to give it. The testimony of government officials should be treated like that of any other witness. It carries no more or less weight simply because of their position. Witnesses who testified under immunity should be examined with greater caution than other witnesses. Keep in mind that chart, summary, and demonstrative aids shown during the trial are not evidence and won't be available to you in the courtroom. So they won't have the charts and the summaries and all these other things. They can't have all of that. They're going to strictly have to go with what was told to them, what they see. They don't have to go by their memory. Some witnesses were allowed to use pseudonyms. This should not influence your judgment of their credibility. Evaluate them as you would any other witness. The defendant chose not to testify, which is his legal right. So you can't infer because he didn't get up there and he said anything. Now, him getting on the stand, that's great fodder for journalism, social media pages, content creators. That is great, but it is your legal right not to stay silent. It's the job of the prosecution, that's the burden of the prosecution, to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You must not draw any inference from that choice or hold it against him. Voluntary intoxication may, in some cases, affect whether the defendant had the intent required to commit a RICO predicate offense. Because you did hear, and I'm surprised that the defense didn't keep honing that in with every witness. You know, when you talked with him, was he intoxicated? Do you feel like he had? I wish that. Well, I don't wish. I don't. That I wonder why they didn't continue to harp on that. If they want to show that he was that, because he's even said it, other people have said it, that did he use drugs? We know he had a whole bunch of drugs in his possession when he was raided. That they did not look at that voluntary intoxication. You may have heard the names of people who were not called to testify. Each side has an equal chance to call witnesses. Do not speculate about why someone wasn't called or what they might have said. If you took notes, they are for your personal use only. And remember, you are to consider only evidence and arguments presented within the four walls of this courtroom. No outside reading or research is allowed. Do not communicate about this case in any form on social media platforms like X, Instagram, or YouTube. If you come across anything related to the case, report it to my deputy immediately. Above all, guard against bias, including implicit bias. These are unconscious thoughts that can affect how we interpret information, even if we don't realize it. And a lot of that has to do with how you're socialized and also culture, because different cultures speak in different ways. You know, Black Americans speak in a certain way, but then Mexican Americans speak in a different way. Uh, Black Caribbeans speak in a different way or have a different thing. Are we all Black folks? Yes, because we know that our DNA shows that we hail from the continent of Africa. But our ethnicity, we grew up, our nationalities and ethnicities, we grew up in different countries. So those things are going to impact those types of things. So they're just saying don't let your biases do that. The best place that you could be at that point is just by following the letter of what the law says. It says you will now retire to deliberate. Each of you must make up your own mind after a full and fair discussion with your fellow jurors. Your verdict must be unanimous. Once again, your verdict must be unanimous. If you find yourselves divided at any point, do not reveal how you are split. Any communications with the court, including questions or the final verdict, must come from the foreperson and must be in writing. As for the alternate juries, you are not required to stay, but please provide your phone number to my deputy. You may still be called upon if a replacement is needed or when a verdict is reached. The alternate jurors are 234, 247, 292, 321, and 330, which are seated at the top row. Please do not read or follow any news coverage related to this trial if it any appears. I want to express my deep gratitude for your time, patience, and service over these past 2 months or more for some of you. Before you go, my deputy will share my personal contact details. I'd be happy to give you a tour of the courthouse sometime. You are free to deliberate as long as you feel necessary. If you wish to stay past 5, that decision is entirely up to you. This is your process. Take the time you need. There is no rush. What matters is that you read a verdict you all stand by. So they've entered the deliberation room, and the deliberation officially happened at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oh. So we are currently in jury watch. So we will check in to see what's going on. So they have been deliberating about 2.5 hours. And they have selected jury number 5 to be their foreperson. So right now we are in verdict watch. We are in verdict watch. So we're just going to wait and see what's going on. I may try to pull a panel together and we do I really would love to do just like an autopsy of this whole case and pull out information that we had. What do you all think? From the information that you've been given in regards to any of these charges, what do you all think? Me personally, I think they haven't banged up the rights on the transportation for the prostitute. They participated in that act. I think that they have him pretty much banged up to rights to that. That's my personal opinion. Now, with the trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, if they don't find, now I'm just going to my understanding. So anybody that's a lawyer out there or very versed in legal talk, my understanding is they have to find that count four, one of count four or count five, to consider the racketeering conspiracy. So it really hedges on Jane. They have to find that hey, Buck Money. Hey, Pam, I think he's guilty of count three for sure. Well, the count two and the count three is for Cassie. Count four and count five are for Jane. So if I'm reading his instructions, it sounds like they have to find at least one of these charges, count four or count five. Well, the two counts that happened for Jane, they have to find him guilty of one of those counts. If they don't find him guilty of one of those counts that is referring to Jane, then they can't find him guilty of count one. That's what it sounds like to me. Let's go back to what was said. Let's go back. Let's go back. Okay, he gave a lastly. He says, lastly, the government must prove that at least one act occurred within the jurisdiction of the Southern District of New York, which includes 8 counties. So one of those 8 counties it has to. Here it is. I'm going to read this one right here. For RICO, the statute of limitation is 5 years. Therefore, the government must prove the enterprise continued beyond 2019. All right. If they fail to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty. You see what I'm talking about right there? That little count right there. I'll read it again. For RICO, the statute of limitation is 5 years. Therefore, the government must prove the enterprise continued beyond 2019. So they have to find that Jane was trafficked, that Jane had the transportation of the prostitutes for transportation for prostitution. If they don't find any one of them two charges in regards to Jane, they can't go back and then go under those charges for the RICO. So their whole testimony hinged on Jane. All of this hinged on Jane, because if they find that, then they can go back to Cassie. But if they find that they don't believe that she was trafficked or she was transported for the prostitute, if they do not find any guilty verdict on either one of those two charges, they can't find him guilty on, they can't even begin to go over the RICO. Because he started dating Jane in 2021. Wasn't it? Wasn't it 2021 to 2024? And see, if they had Gina, I think that there was an overlap, because Gina was the overlap between Cassie and Jane. So she fit that 2019 Interesting, interesting, interesting. So we will see. So it all hinges on Jane and whether or not that they believe that Jane was trafficked. And one of the things I think that the defense has is the fact that Jane has testified that she has done Wild King nights with a whole nother couple. So we will see. All right, people, we are in the middle of verdict watch. We are in the middle of verdict watch. So again, it hinges on Jane. If the if the juries believe that count 4 and count 5, which I assume that's with Jane, if they do a not guilty on these two charges, it sounds like they cannot find any, they can't find a guilty verdict on the racketeering and conspiracy. So they could do the trafficking for Cassie, but they won't be able to do the racketeering. So count 4 and 5 is count 1 is very dependent on count 4 and count 5, and that has everything to do with the Jane. Very dependent on that. Because again, Mia wasn't there for Jane. Mia was there for Cassie. Capricorn Clark was there when Cassie was there. The arson happened when during Cassie's time. So we will see, y'all. All right, people, we do this every week. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you care. Y'all, we are in verdict watch. So make sure you tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker, tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. I will come back time to time just to kind of go back over some more stuff to see where the jury's at. But right now, we are in verdict watch. And as always, bye-bye.